Pidge had found a conference room in the more unused part of the ship. It was perfect for getting away from the noise everyone else made while she worked on the more difficult projects. This round of Pidge has to do everything, she was being given 1 week to complete a program that would separate the good Galra from the bad Galra. It had taken almost a month to create the original Galra finder, and months after that to perfect it. Being given a week to do this was irritating enough by itself. But Lance had found her hideaway. How he had was anyone's guess. For once, at least, he wasn't talking or trying to get her attention. He was just pacing back and forth with a blank expression on his face, and for some unholy reason, this was more distracting than his usual chatter. "Holy crows, Lance," she snapped finally. "I'm trying to work. I can't focus with you moving around in my periph. Get out." "Can I ask you something real quick?" "No, get out!" He shrugged and started to move toward the door. Pidge fell back into her chair and sighed. She blinked blearily at the screens and considered throwing it. She had no idea how she was going to do this. Over the next few days, Hunk and Coran swung by to pitch in and help, which she was more than grateful for. With their input, she managed to refigure most of the data. Shiro and Allura helped by bringing her the data Lotor sent their way. One more day, she thought. Then I can sleep. "Hey, Pidge!" "Lance, if we're not being attacked, I will attack you." Lance hesitated, and Pidge let out a growl of irritation and forced herself to not look at him. Figured he'd show up just as she was about to finish. She hated it. He was never this annoying at the garrison. When did he get so distracting? "Pidge, I just really need to talk to you," he said, and she rolled her eyes. "After this, I'm going to sleep. I can't help you pass the next level for another week." "No, Pidge, that's not... Are you okay?" "What?" she snapped, finally facing him. "Pidge, have you slept at all?" He was worried, she realized, but that only irritated her more. "Of course I have, idiot," she scoffed. "I'm not the idiot of the group." "Touché," he said, and reached over to feel her head. She smacked his hand away and glared as angrily as she could. "Just leave me alone to finish this, and then leave me alone to rest. Is that too much to ask?" He took a deep breath, nodded, and then stood. Thinking he was finally going to leave, Pidge went back to her computer, only to have Lance block the screen with his head. "What the—" Lance picked her up easily and carried her out of the room. Stunned and sleep-deprived, she didn't react until they were almost to her room. "Put me down, Lance! What do you think you're doing?" "What have you eaten in the last 24 hours?" "Put me down!" "I do not recognize that as a food," he said. "Answer my question." "I've got work to do. I'm almost done. Idiot!" "Yes, we've covered that part of the conversation. Now answer my question." "Duh!" Still not a food. She kicked and squirmed, but he held her fast. One arm wrapped around her shoulders and the other under her knees. This was humiliating. He walked into her room and clicked his tongue. Not like his room was any better, but at least he had a pathway to the bed. There was no path in Pidge's mountain of clutter, but that didn't stop him from traversing this minefield and plopping Pidge onto her bed. She immediately leapt to her feet, and then sat back down. The room was spinning uncontrollably, and her body was starting to seize up. Her nose started to burn, and the next thing she knew, she was doubled over and heaving. Her vision blurred, and it was nearly impossible to get breathing again. When she could catch her breath, she noticed the trash can in front of her, being held by Lance, who was also patting her back. "As I thought," he said, shaking the trash can. "Nothing but bile. You've not eaten at all. You've not slept nearly enough, and I am now starting to resent the idiot comment." "I don't want to be lectured. I want to finish my work. I'm almost done. If you just left me alone, I'd have it done, and then I could be sick all I want." She tried to stand again, but Lance pulled her back down. "The project can wait a few days," he said, attempting to wrap a blanket around her, but she shrugged it off. "Not if we want to get this job done faster." "Didn't want to do this," he said, "but if you don't take a few days off, I'm going to tell everyone that you're sick, and you're sick because you put what they wanted before your own health. Then they will feel so guilty and sad that they'll badger you with, 'How are you feeling today?' and 'How much sleep did you get?' for the rest of your life." Pidge froze. Half of her knew this was stupid, but then somewhere in her mind, she could totally see this happening. It was terrifying to think about. Or, Lance said after seeing his words sink in, I go to Corinne and the others and explain that you just need a few more days to find Tweak It and that you've locked yourself in your room. If you stay in bed, Pidge, then once your fever goes down, I promise I'll bring you your computer and you can work on it in bed. I just have to insist that you eat what I give you and you rest when I tell you. I can take care of myself, she grumbled. Coming from a sick body, that argument isn't very convincing, he countered. Lie down and sleep. He stood with the trash can and headed toward the bathroom. She heard him wash out her sick without a word of complaint. Scowling, she realized she'd lost this round. She tucked herself into the covers. When Lance came back, he forged a path between the door, bathroom, and the bed. When he got to the bed, he placed the can on the floor within easy reach for her and held out his hand again to feel her head. This time she let him. The fever isn't too high, he said. You should have your computer back sometime tomorrow. Better, she muttered, still irritated in her submission. Just get some sleep. He turned to leave, but she grabbed his jacket. He looked back, a little surprised. I'm really sorry, she said. I didn't mean to call you an idiot. I'm just really angry. He laughed. She glared. Sorry, he said, chuckling. If I got upset every time someone called me an idiot, I'd live a miserable life. So I'm not bothered by it at all. In fact, I embrace it. My idiocy will save me one day when we meet aliens that want to suck out everyone's brains. One look at me, and they'll just move on to the next person. How could he go from almost poetic to complete and uncontested stupidity in one go? But the image of brain-sucking aliens giving Lance a pass was funny, and it did make her laugh. She slept deep, and when she woke, she found Lance placing her computer on the desk. How long? She asked groggily. She could probably sleep for another few hours. It's lunchtime, he said, holding out a plate of toast and something that looked like applesauce. This should be easy enough on your stomach. No butter? Toast without butter was a crime. I'm stretching it enough with the fruit, he said. I shouldn't be giving you anything acidic, but I figured just toast would be sad. She accepted the food and the glass of water he held out next. Sip that, don't gulp, he ordered, unless you want to see everything again. Also, small bites and chew well. Gee, when did you become such a mom? She said in good humor. But Lance paused for a moment to think about it. Both my parents worked, he shrugged. I have siblings to take care of. They were notorious for trying to go to the beach or going to play outside even though they were sick. If we didn't keep a sharp eye on them, they'd pass out in the middle of the street, wake up, laugh, and then do it all over again. Jovial family you got there, Pidge said, picturing a mini Lance doing exactly that. It wasn't very hard. Yeah, well, we're one of the lucky ones. Lance grinned and patted her laptop. After you're done eating, you can work on this. I'll be back in a few hours to see how you're doing, okay? Thanks, she said, and actually meant it. How did the others take me needing a few more days? Lotor got a little pouty, but that's all. No one really expected it to be done in just 1 week. If you needed more time, you should have just said something at the beginning. Yeah, but I got caught up in the energy, and part of me saw it as a challenge. I really have a hard time when challenged. Obviously, he grinned at her. But I've got to get going now. I got wrapped up into helping Corinne with some doohickey or other. Try not to break it, she called after him as he left. I'm back, baby, Pidge cried as she entered the bridge. She hurried to her seat and uploaded the program. Man, this problem was tougher than I thought, but thanks to everyone, I was able to figure it out. But as an artist and a professional, I just couldn't present it to you without it being glitch-free and in working order. She grinned up at the group and paused. Corinne and Hunk were standing very close together. Allura looked tired and slightly grouchy. Lance had his arms folded and looked like he had when he was pacing the week before. And Shiro looked done. His arms were also folded, and she could tell that he was upset. All in all, the atmosphere in the room was tense and almost unwelcoming. Hurry up, Pidge, Shiro said and smiled at her. This is going to help us a ton. Her excitement back, now that she knew that he wasn't mad at her, she showed off her latest brainchild. The extra 2 days had really given her the time to make it how she wanted it, and she loved showing off her work, and she did it with zeal. Every ship in the Galra Empire is tagged, she said, wrapping up her show and tell. So I used the information Lotor gave us to match ship with the commander and all its corresponding intel. The only problem we face now is if and when the bad Galra build their own ships and bases outside the Empire tagging system. So, the genius that I am, I left that part of the program open to those necessary changes. Awesome! Hunk was so excited as he looked at the new map. This is so cool. I feel like we can breathe easier now that we have something a little more concrete to look at before heading into a fight, Allura said, her relieved smile making her tired look disappear. Well done, Shiro said, all grins and praise. Pidge looked at Lance, who never failed to praise her as well, but he wasn't even looking at her. He was looking from the map to Shiro, then back at the map. Lance, you okay? She asked, and was surprised to see him jump a little. Yeah, he said, and the grin was back on his face. This looks amazing. You always know how to make these things easy to use. They talked about their next course of action and then dispersed. She followed Hunk into the kitchen, starving and ready for a real meal. Making sure they were completely alone, she leaned over to him. So, what's with the weird vibe in the meeting earlier? She said conversationally while shoving food into her mouth. Hunk pulled a face. The peacekeeper that he was, he didn't even like to talk about confrontations. Right now, he'd prefer to focus on his bread dough. When Lance came and told us that you were taking a few more days, Shiro wanted to talk to you, Hunk said, and lowered its voice. But Lance stopped him and said you wanted to be left alone. I did, she said. Yeah, but Shiro said that he needed to hear it from you, Hunk continued, his face showing more and more discomfort as he did so. Lance even grabbed his arm and held him back to keep him from bothering you. But then it turned into a shouting match. Shiro thinks Lance is getting too cocky and sticking his nose in where it doesn't belong. Lance thinks Shiro is... What? He called Shiro crazy, Hunk said and shuddered. Said he must have taken too many blows to the head because... Oh my gosh, Hunk, just tell me. Because he said Shiro's been acting weird lately. Then he told Shiro that he, Shiro, should take a few days off and chill and get his game back. Shiro looked like he was going to start throwing punches, but then he forced himself to calm down. You could really see the effort it took. Then he left the room without another word. He and Lance haven't spoken to each other since. Pidge couldn't believe it. I asked Lance how you guys took the news, and he told me that Lotor got a little pouty, and that's it. Well, Lotor did get pouty, Hunk said, nodding. It was pretty funny. But he probably didn't want you to stress out about a fight he practically initiated. I mean, they can't be in the same room without thunderclouds forming, and I swear the temperature drops to below freezing if they happen to catch each other's eye. This is all my fault, she thought, suddenly not hungry anymore. If I had just taken better care of myself, and had been a bit more honest about the amount of time I would need, this wouldn't have happened. Oh, don't blame yourself, Hunk gave her a little shove. Pidge swore up and down that Hunk could read minds sometimes. Why not, she challenged. I'm the idiot. Lance will not thank you for trying to take his title away from him, Hunk chastised. And truth be told, I kind of saw this coming a while back. What do you mean? I've known Lance longer than any of you, and I know when he gets uncomfortable. He's not been very comfortable around Shiro since he snapped at him a few months back. I heard Shiro apologized, though, Pidge said. So why all the build-up? Your guess is as good as mine at this point, Hunk said, turning his attention back to his food preparations. Still doesn't feel good being a catalyst, she said, picking at her food. Remember that next time you do chemistry, Hunk grinned, childishly, as he added yeast and sugar to his bowl. Lance stared at the ceiling of his room in horror. How could he have been so stupid? What was the first 10 years of his life if not to handle situations like this? He was out of practice. Spend years acting the idiot, and before you know it, you are one. He didn't think the skills his father had drilled into him would be needed out here. Allura and Kuran did the political bonding stuff, Hunk and Pidge had all the tech stuff covered, and Shiro and Keith were the fighter pilot badasses. Not that he didn't give his all into what they were doing, he just did what he thought he should to fill in the gaps. Not a very fulfilling role, and one he honestly hated, but the others were good at not making him feel too left out, especially with Keith now gone and out of the picture. Keith, that bastard. Lance swore and stood up to pace. He had to figure out what to do next. He had practically painted himself into a corner, but he was sure that his many years of playing The Floor is Lava would aid him in this. But what if... No, the safety of the others came first. He thought Pidge and Matt had said something about secret communications and whatnot. Lance had planned to ask her about it, and if she'd help him get in contact with Keith without anyone else finding out. Surely he'd know what was wrong and figure out a way to solve it. The guy had been the leader, and, Lance grudgingly admitted, once the jerk had calmed down and gotten over himself a little, he was a really good one. "Lance, you in there?" "Yeah, come in." Pidge walked in, and she did not look happy. "For the love of Pearl, what did I do this time?" "You lied when you said only Lotor was upset," she said after she closed the door. "Oh." "He wasn't upset with you. We're the ones fighting," he said. "I didn't think dumping my complaints on a sick person was a good idea." "What about all the other times you came in? And bother you while you were working?" Lance was grinning, but Pidge was unimpressed. "I think you should go apologize," she said. "You went a little too far calling him crazy. The guy has been through a lot, and, honestly, that was a cheap shot." "Well, Was that his next move? Would this approach really work out? Did the answer to his worry just waltz in and shower him with knowledge? His family was devout Catholic, but this was the first time he ever felt like thanking the saints. Clearing his throat, he replied, "Yeah, it was a cheap shot. I realized that after I said it. But he's been so moody lately I haven't found the time to approach him." "Well," Pidge said, "he's pretending to train all the while just standing there staring at the wall." "That's what I mean by moody, Pidge," Lance said with a sigh. "He'll probably just walk away, or I'll startle him so bad he takes my head off." "Want me to come along?" she offered with a snide smile. "Oh, yes," he said in his princess voice, "and would you mind holding my hand, too?" "Just get in there, you wuss," she laughed. "I can't believe you guys have been like this for days." He laughed as well, trying not to show how worried he was. What if it doesn't work? He made his way to the training deck and tried his best to gain control of, first, his emotions and thoughts, second, his facial features, and third, his body language. He needed this to work. Lance was not going to slip up again. He couldn't afford to. Pidge was right. The Black Paladin was just standing there in the middle of the floor with a blank expression. Lance took a deep breath and coughed slightly a safe distance away from the man's reach. Shiro looked over at him and blinked in surprise. "I just wanted to say I was sorry for saying such cruel things," Lance said quickly before Shiro could walk away or say something that would make Lance not want to apologize anymore. Shiro sighed. "I didn't handle it very well either." And that was the closest Lance was going to get to an apology back. Lance nodded in acceptance and continued. "I just wish you would trust me a bit more. I know I'm not the brightest crown in the box, but I hoped you would rely on me the way a right arm should be." "Lance, this has nothing to do with your intelligence, or anything." Shiro shook his head. "Never mind. I'm glad we've been able to talk again. So, let's not have a repeat of before." The man left, and Lance waited until he was good and gone before sucking in as much air as he could. He had been more nervous than he thought. Hopefully, the result would be worth the stress.